The God brain. Bobby shorthand. It's dissociative identity disorder. And dissociative emotional disorder. Combine, obviously, trauma. Remember, life is suffering. So if you suffer a whole lot and you become dissociative identity and dissociative emotional, you become a god, because that somehow makes sense. The whole dissociative identity disorder is very interesting, because basically your parietal part of your brain splits and you develop two personalities, and you also develop a vision condition. It's common with it. Now, these people were raped, abused, and all that other crazy shit as kids, and eventually they have split personality, or dissociative identity. My theory behind this is a pretty straightforward one. I think why they have to kill somebody every couple, like, the anxiety, when your brain splits into dissociative identity disorder, it's a defense mechanism. It enables you to develop a second psychology that can do the things you won't do. You can't make yourself do those things. So you come up with another personality, and that's the bad guy. And he will do those things. I remember Ganon literally just straight up telling me he has two personalities, and one of them's evil and one of them's good. And he's getting into heaven because he has a good guy and an evil guy. But I was like, but you did that to yourself, right? And he was, yes. I was like, and you're going to go to God and tell him, I did this to myself so I could kill people. But you're going to let me into heaven. And God's going to go, no. That's not how that works. You decided to do that. You fucked yourself up. You made all those decisions. You're going to hell. The other part is I believe the lead causes fear and anxiety. And the longer you're stuck in the lizard brain, the longer dissociative identity disorder lasts. So as long as you feel fear and anxiety, the stronger the separation of your mind and your id and superego. I recognize the hardest theory that there's yourself and there's the id and superego, which are kind of your counsels, and they kind of try to guide you which decision to make. And in this brain that has dissociative identity disorder, I think the individual is killed. But the id and ego remain. The good and the bad remain. And this is the devil and the god stupidity. It's actually just the human brain in defense mode. Now, the LSD apparently exacerbates the condition. Obviously, it has lead in it. Lead causes anxiety. Anxiety and fear. And fear. And fear. You'll find this entire fucking cult is the cult of fear. This stuff isn't very complex at all when you know enough psychology. I'm not one of those guys, but the treatment for this, they started the treatment on a couple of the church leaders, and it's ego hypnosis. Yeah, you can't hypnotize a dissociative identity person. Stu explained to me that the church had apparently captured a Freemason, and they were poisoning him with heavy metals until he was retarded and he was barely functioning, but they couldn't hypnotize him no matter how much heavy metals they gave him, and eventually the guy died from heavy metal poisoning. But they couldn't hypnotize him because he had dissociative identity disorder. But that brings in modern science with the ability to hypnotize the ego. And I remember this from Stu, who told me that they got rid of the other guy, and he doesn't know how to tell the church. The other guy's your ego. And it got hypnotized and told, you're no longer necessary. Go away. Stu's not in danger. He's fine. Go away. And the parietal part of your brain, just like many parts of your body, heals. It separates and then comes back together. And then you're a whole person. You no longer have dissociative identity disorder. This is different than multiple personality disorder, but we're not going to get into that because that's a whole nother bucket. But yeah, so even I distinctly remember Ganon giggling in the office and acting fucking weird and trying to demonstrate to me he's crazy. And I was just great. Crazy. Crazies have been a part of my life forever. So, not special, not unique. Dissociative identity disorder isn't the God brain. It's a mental disorder. You're not special. You're not unique. Now, the other side is dissociative emotional disorder. That's where you believe your emotions are coming from somewhere else. So, let's say they fuck you up with heavy metals, rape you, destroy your fucking psychology, and basically you're convinced inside your own head you're dead. So, there's only super ego and the id. or the super ego and the ego controlling you. So your goofy ass is walking around with these two parts of your brain, the good and the bad, and you believe that these two things are gods because you're a moron, and then your emotions come in and you're like, what are those? I don't know what those are either. Dissociative emotional disorder. I don't know why this happened, but I had actually gotten a call. Let me see if I got that phone around. I haven't done this one in a bit. Ring, ring, ring. Hello. Hi, we're the psychologists, working on the church leaders. Okay. And we wanted to ask you some questions. Okay. So what do you know? And I was like, well, that Gannon guy told me he had multiple personalities. I was like, Stu told me there was another guy in him. And I was like, nah, it's either multiple personalities or dissociative identity disorder. Well, why do you think they have that? Well, they're traumatized as kids. That's where that comes from. That's common sense. Okay. Do you think this condition is treatable? Yeah, probably. It's probably treatable. I'd treat it. It's treatable. I don't know what the processes would be. And, well, it involves the hypnosis of the ego and convincing it to go back to its normal place and then resetting the mind. And then we hit the individual with positive affirmations. And then we reset the brain. And, okay, yeah, do all those. Oh, but it's not going to work. Why isn't it going to work? They're poisoned with heavy metals. It completely alters their psychology. You got to get rid of the heavy metals first, and then you can do that. You got to give them the chelation therapy. That's stuff I need. Nobody cares about you, Bobby. Oh. Well. Okay, then. We're going to try that. Well, okay. Now, I don't know why they needed to call me to see if they could get permission to operate or give somebody psychological help. I remember Officer Red tried to explain to me that he didn't have the disorder properly. Yeah. He doesn't have multiple person or dissociative identity disorder. He has dissociative emotional disorder. But everything's compartmentalized in his head. And this means that not every church leader actually has the disorder, just the majority of them have it. When I was a kid getting abused, I did have, I guess, for a short time, kind of dissociative identity where I believe there was a stronger Bob to handle the situation, a better Bob. And after not being abused for an extended period, he just faded into my subconscious and eventually vanished. Yeah. How do you like that? I think the thing with Stu, and once again, the murders these guys have to perform, and the reason why they need murder is, if you're the ego and you have been existing so long, you've gained some kind of sentience or consciousness, you probably don't want to fade away into the back of the darkness of the mind. You probably don't want to just go, okay, I did my job, bye, and then fade into that darkness. And I guess I can understand that, but you're also committing atrocities and murdering people, and that makes you the bad person. A big part of the dissociative identity disorder is I think they actually give it to a large number of the church members as they traumatize the shit out of them to terrify the fuck out of them. Because I remember the wives explaining to me some of the church members later on couldn't be hypnotized, like the higher ranking ones, because they have dissociative identity disorder. And they're not the only crazies to do this. Once again, the church told me the Freemasons did it, so great. And I could see the uses in having somebody have a second psychology that's psychopathic and a kill machine. But I really don't think you need an army of them to live in modern society. Okay. It's kind of like a nuclear overreaction. But the other side is these guys have a thing about being brave and going out of your shell and doing things you wouldn't normally do, but then they switch personalities to do it. So that means they're not actually brave, they're not actually courageous, they just have another guy in them that does it for them. I don't know what you call that. I call that bullshit, but whatever. Yeah. So that's the God brain in a nutshell. That's why it can't be hypnotized. In Stu's world, it means that you're a god if you can't be hypnotized. And the truth is it can be hypnotized. You just have to hypnotize either the superego or the ego. I've never heard of a hypnotherapy that hypnotizes the superego, and I find that fascinating. But the fact that you can sort out the ego and actually hypnotize it separate from the main brain tells you that your hidden ego, to some extent, have consciousness. I guess in your own mind, you should kind of refer to yourself as a we instead of a me or an I. That's kind of scary. Think like you got this, you have your consciousness, but then you have the consciousness of the moral brain that does the moral things, and then you have the ego brain that does the ego thing. And I remember having this theory with the wives where they effectively were trying to explain to me part of the process, and this is their thing. Like, I just explained it from a psychology part. They explained they basically switch you with your conscious and unconscious mind, and then they rotate that to have the ego come forward. And your ego brain, unconscious ego brain, is your God brain, because it can use a bunch of nonsense to see the future, kind of, but not really, and communicate in bizarre ways, because the subconscious mind has access to otherworldly things. Here's my theory. You know how you throw a football, and there's, like, if you ever break down throwing a football a distance, there's a whole bunch of math that goes into it. There's measuring the distance and, like, all these calculations, plus, like, wind speed and, you know, all that crazy shit. But if your brain is healthy, you can throw a football to a very specific distance and area, right? But you're not doing all that math. Your brain has already done that math and did it. And I think that's how the subconscious works. I don't think that it's actually psychic or telepathic. I think it's just so good at collecting so much information simultaneously and putting it together, it can predict most likely outcomes. Not 100% outcomes, mind you, but the most likely. And I think when you switch them and you're talking to it, you're talking to something that seems almost psychic or otherworldly, when in actuality it's just a computing, calculating machine that has used all of its, because it's mindless, and it is mindless, it's not conscious, it's the unconscious, it's the subconscious, it's done all the calculations, and there you go. That's how it knows. It knows instinctually, through calculation, just quick, instant, like throwing a football or a baseball or shooting a basketball. How the brain calculates all that. And I remember trying to explain that to the wives, and this is the thing, I had a fucked up metal brain, so I was doing a really bad job, and they told me that I didn't understand the science and I needed to shut up. I think I do understand the science, and I think I understand it better than them, because what they have is a theoretical concept created by some asshole a million years ago that thought that having a dissociative identity and a dissociative emotional disorder made him superior because he could murder and kill and commit all the atrocities known to man because he didn't have guilt or remorse because he was psychopathic. The arrogance in these people to believe that they somehow came up with a better mind than the one that was given to them. You gotta applaud that. You know God's about to punch these motherfuckers, I'll tell you what. Side notes, my cuddle buddy once explained to me that her other psychology is called like Maya or Moya, and she then explained to me that Maya can do all these crazy things and had all these powers, and I just eye rolled. I've always chalked it up to mask theory. Mask theory is a specific Bobby theory. Yeah, trust me, a cracker's about to steal this one. Mask theory is like The Legend of Zelda. When you put on a mask, you become that thing. When I was a kid, I put on a suit of armor, and I thought I was a hero, and I thought I was a knight. And then I went to fight my brother, and he kicked the blade right off of my sword, and then kicked me, and I went flying across the room, and my armor flew everywhere, and I quickly learned I'm not a hero. Yeah. Go figure. The guy that gets the shit kicked out of him isn't the hero. Yeah. That's what I have to say about that. That's my theory, is they convince you the other guy's there, and then you believe that other thing into being. But also, the parietal part of your mind is split, and you can't be hypnotized, so there's that. Unlike my dumbass, I remember the wives were having a field day with me because they had to keep alternating my hypnosis because I didn't have proper dissociative identity disorder. Yeah. They kept alternating between God and ego through individual hypnosis, making it seem like I was either the devil or the God. But I kept fucking it up because I had my own idea of what God is, and I had my own idea of what the devil is. As God, I gave out money, and then the church just went and murdered the people I gave money to. I mean, I got fucked over a bunch of times. One of the things when I was President Bobby Rant, there was a Minecraft dude that was really popular, and there's a second place loser that called and told me, like, tell the next guy that he's going to get cancer. And then I talked to that guy, and I was like, oh, this other guy told me to tell you you're going to get cancer. And then the wives were like, don't ever do that when somebody calls. And then that guy called, and he was explaining that he's the #1 Minecraft player because he just killed the guy in first place. And I was like, no, you just admitted you're a loser eternally because you couldn't beat him without murdering him because you're a fucking loser. And then he got mad because I told him he was a loser, and he was telling me he wasn't a loser. He just merely cheated to win. And I was like, that means you're a loser. By definition, that means you're a loser. And he was, I'm not a loser. I'm going to be the greatest Minecraft player in the world now that the best guy's dead. And I was like, but everybody will always compare you to him, and everybody will always think he's better than you because you never proved you were actually better. And now he's dead, and you're never going to be able to prove you're better. And that guy used to call me nonstop, harassing me about what I said, telling me he couldn't sleep at night. He didn't like that he was never, that he had spent, this is the thing with the envy brain, he had been comparing himself to this guy for so long and didn't understand why people liked him better than him. One, genuinosity is the word. None of these people, regardless of how much money they make, how far they make it, they will never feel any connection with anybody because they can't be genuine. They're fake people. They're caricatures of people. The same type of feeling you and I get from a hug or a kiss, they get from human suffering. They're not people. They're not human beings. And they shouldn't be treated like human beings. This concludes my God brain rant. If you got any questions or just you want to know about the secret God brain at this church, Google dissociative identity disorder and you'll know everything you need to know. And you'll understand why I'm like, that's really dumb. Once again, vision problems is one of the funnier things. I didn't realize that. I remember Gannon told me about having vision problems, which kind of cracked me up. Yeah. My cuddle buddy had astigmatism, and she used to tell me about her astigmatism and how it needs corrective. You don't have astigmatism, you have multiple personalities. That's what's wrong with you. They fucked up your brain. And they didn't tell you there were negative side effects to what they did to you. And if you're dissociative identity from the church, you might want to look up all the negative side effects you have, and you might understand why people don't like you. Also, you're emotionally stunted. How's that? So not only are you messed up, you're emotionally stunted, you have you have dissociative identity disorder, dissociative emotional disorder, you have, tetralead brain. Yeah, tetralead brain. And there's other heavy metals they give you to fuck with your brain. So you have that. And you're malignant narcissist. So you mix all those together and you get the God brain. Whew. There you go. You're welcome.